Hello, good morning, afternoon, evening, night. The question today is whether you can build a Zettelkasten without a plan. When I see lots of other people talking about a Zettelkasten, often you'll see people putting things into preconceived categories. Categories that they perhaps intend to fill with notes. Categories that they aspire to research, or perhaps general knowledge categories such as philosophy, theology, subject categories. Can you build a Zettelkasten without those categories? And when I say a Zettelkasten, I mean a functional Zettelkasten that you will use and find value in. And the answer has to be yes. Not only does the answer have to be yes, but I would argue you cannot build a Zettelkasten with categorization. You cannot build a Zettelkasten with a plan. The idea of building a Zettelkasten with a plan is counter to the very idea of what a Zettelkasten is and what it achieves for you. So, if we take a look at this box, this is my Zettelkasten. It's filled with these notes. And these notes are not organized according to category. There are two methods of organization. And the word organization in this context might be a bit misleading because they're not really organized at all. As I've explained before, this first note is the first note, not because it's the most important note, not because it's the note from which all ideas in the Zettelkasten flow, but it's the note that I wrote first. That is why it's the first note. Now, can I go all the way to the back and say, well, this note is the last note that I have written? No, I cannot. Because occasionally I will create a new note and slip it in the middle. And that goes to my other area of organization, in that you'll see that this is note 1A, and behind it sits note... This is note 1. Behind it sits note 1A. Now, why do I do that? Sometimes I want to cluster certain notes together, simply because I want to. If I were to be completely rational and follow the rules of this Zettelkasten to a T, I would not be doing that at all. I would simply go 1, 2, 3, 4. But I suppose the only practical help is that ultimately it's more interesting to write 2B3 than it is to have to write 1342, 1343. And it does help me remember where things are. So, for instance, I know under the number 30, I'll find all of my notes, not all of them even, but a good chunk of notes on Peter Berger's The Sacred Canopy. So here we are within 30 already. Number of notes here, that's 29. There's probably a better way to do this on camera, isn't there? That's 29B. 30. Every human society is an enterprise of world building. Peter Berger, page 3 of The Sacred Canopy. And then 30A again, is actually an idea I had that tacks onto that. 30A1 from the Sacred Canopy. I've built this thus far without any real plan. The only plan, I suppose, is what I want to read next and what I want to make notes on, what I want to research. So if I go towards the back, there are much more notes on the idea of place in a society. The significance of place. What do you call it? I have a book up here. Topophilia. This idea of topophilia. Because that's what I most recently have been researching. At the beginning, again, notes on Heidegger, because when I started my Zettelkasten, I was researching Heidegger's essay, The Question Concerning Technology. And so, how do I find things? Well, there are a few methods that I've yet to employ, because my Zettelkasten isn't really big enough to require it, where you do create a handwritten bibliography. And you have a citation to every note that references a particular text. And this is something I am getting to the point that I'm considering doing myself, so that I can pick up a book again and identify where I might have already transferred ideas into the Zettelkasten. That would be one form of organization, and that would be one way of finding ideas again. When you know the idea is from a particular book, you can find it. If you know the idea is from you specifically, you could keep a separate list of notes you've come up with that are precisely your ideas and no one else's. By and large, that's it. So what do I do with these notes? Again, I want to cover essentially the same thing from a few different angles, because I've just seen so many people, still have questions on how it works. And so it's all about the connections that are in these cards. So if I take this card, 30, B1, B2, Goetz believed there was some spiritual eye that can instinctively and emotionally break through this wall between subjectivity and objectivity. And then I have all of these connections along the bottom. And that's where I start. That's how I write. There's a few different ways I do it. I'm always trying things out, seeing what works. Sometimes I will, as a kind of journaling prompt, just have a Zettelkasten conversation, and then I'll show you an example here. I'll just go into my journal, and simply start. Here I started with note 2A, and then I just followed connections down until I had an outline for a whole essay. And this essay you can read this essay on my Substack. That came from that Zettelkasten conversation. Another way I like to do it is I'll take a card, I'll take my trusty writing machine, though of course you can do this on a typewriter, on a piece of paper, on a computer if you absolutely must. It's my cat on a wobbly stool. And really take a card, write a paragraph or so, everything I can, and then follow the next connection. Write about how they connect, write about what that card says, and so forth. Follow the next connection. Go back to that original card, go to that next connection, follow that thread all the way through. And every time I do this, I find new things, I follow different threads. As you can see, there's enough cards here now where no two Zettelkasten conversations are the same. And the reason I call it a Zettelkasten conversation is because that's exactly what it is. It is a conversation. It is a conversation with these note cards. It is not a systematized knowledge management thingamabob. It's a conversation. It's organic. just as you talk with a friend. I'd love to know what questions you have, because I feel like I'm covering the same things again, hopefully maybe in a way that might make them more clear to you in a way that was not before, or you might find this less clear than before. It all depends on you, the audience, at this point. But that's really how it works. It's a conversation, and you don't need a plan to have a conversation. In fact, you can probably recall a time when you planned to have a certain conversation and ended up having a much different, but perhaps much better, more fulfilling conversation in the end. And that's exactly what your Zettelkasten does. You might go in with a plan, you might go in to this very Zettelkasten and say, well, I want to write an essay about this and that. And you start following these ideas, these threads, perhaps making new connections. And you're going to have one hell of a time, because you're experiencing the unexpected. And that's always fun. And that's where new ideas truly grow. I'm starting now with this Zettelkasten to have what I believe are genuinely new ideas. I will think of something, put it in here, come across it again, and it makes its way into an essay. And I'll start searching around. Has anyone else actually thought of doing this particular thing? And as far as I can tell, from what I can see, no one has. That's very exciting. That's really, I would say, the ultimate goal of a Zettelkasten is to enable you to have your own original creative ideas in whatever realm you work in. So, do you need to have a plan to start your Zettelkasten? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you go in to your Zettelkasten with a plan, you will fail. It's as simple as that. And maybe you'll use it for a while, sure. Maybe it will even be somewhat fruitful. But as it grows, your plan, if it's going to work, is actually going to limit the connections you can make. Because as soon as you start categorizing and physically placing notes together based on topics, that's when your creativity is limited. And unless you are interested in limiting your creativity, I would highly advise not doing it. So, that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this, stick around.